Welcome, everybody, to the Jewish Pro-Life Show. I'm Cecily, founder and president of the Jewish Pro-Life Foundation, where we are making the original pro-life religion pro-life again. Our mission is to bring much-needed Torah-based pro-life education to the Jewish community, provide Jewish-friendly pregnancy care and adoption referrals, and healing after abortion for Jewish women and men who suffer. And we do that while bringing a Jewish pro-life voice into the public square, which we pray will counter some of the negative effects that our wayward brothers and sisters are causing with their nonsense about abortion being a Jewish value and a religious right. So we don't agree with any of that. And we're just so very grateful to the Almighty God to give us a platform. And thanks to you for being here, we might be able to broadcast this message a little further than usual. I'm going to share with you Dennis Prager's speech at the recent Turning Point USA Americafest, which was a very good speech. However, it fell short, I thought, and we're going to share that. And then as a follow-up to that, I have a few minutes of a recent video by Rabbi Smith, who's a friend of the JPLF, talking about end-of-life issues as well as beginning-of-life issues and the silence that perpetuates the atrocities against innocent human beings. And then I'm going to share a little bit about the difference between a deliberate torture and murder of a child in the womb with preterm delivery when the mother's life is in danger. I'm always trying to keep that clear in people's minds because we need to change the vocabulary and the semantics around this issue. Oh, and then when all that's done, we'll have open discussion. So hang around because I'm really interested in everything you think and have to say about these things.
Thank you. It's very inspiring to see you all here. So I debated a great deal what I would say to you for 22 minutes. Do I cheer you up? Do I motivate you? These were very real questions that I confronted, and I thought the best thing I can do is explain the current era in which you live and I live. And that's the best service I could provide in these minutes to you. Because there's no way of denying this is the darkest era in American history outside of the Civil War. And once the Civil War was over, while there were terrible residues of anti-Black legislation in the South, etc., nevertheless, the country ultimately united, but the country has never been as disunited as it is today. We live in different moral universes. So I'd like to ask you a question and answer it. If you know that someone says men give birth or men menstruate, every single person in this auditorium, every single American would know their position on Hamas. Now, isn't that interesting? Now, to be a little direct, what the hell does a man giving birth have to do with being pro-Hamas? So I have an answer, because you know that that is true. If a person says men give birth, they will be pro-Hamas and anti-Israel. They're not related issues. So why is that the case? And here is the answer, and I will give you a whole series of examples. The left, and I always distinguish left and liberal. Liberals vote for the left. That is the tragedy of America in a nutshell. But liberalism is not leftism. And so I want to make that clear. But the left, or the progressive, Their moral compass is not only broken, because a broken moral compass, or a broken compass, like a broken clock, is right twice a day. But they're not right twice a day. They're never right, because their compass is set for north to always show south and for east to always show west. It is deliberately broken. So I will give you a whole host of examples to give you an idea of what the broken moral compass is about. Women who object to men who say they are women competing in women's sports, even in weightlifting, these are called haters. Do you understand how that is north, south, east, west? The idea that a man who says he is a woman can compete in women's sports is a broken, deliberately broken moral compass. And that is an example. Again, if you say that men can compete in women's sports if they say they're women, you are overwhelmingly likely to be pro-Hamas. Number two, adults who object to schools taking 5-year-olds to drag queen performances are declared haters. The teachers who take children to drag queen events are enlightened. The idea that you would take a 5-year-old, 6-year-old, 7-year-old child to a drag queen event, irrespective of what you think of drag queens, you may think they are the greatest thing existing, but a child doesn't belong there. But again, if you believe that a child should be exposed to drag queen story hours, you're overwhelmingly likely to be pro-Hamas. Number three, if you believe that all black dormitories on college campuses are good for blacks and good for America and good for the value system of this country, you are overwhelmingly likely to believe that Hamas is right and Israel is wrong. An all-black dormitory is racism, pure, undiluted racism. There are only two groups in America who believe in all black dormitories and all black graduations: progressives / left and the Ku Klux Klan. If you believe that open borders are moral, and that those who want closed borders, even when they support large-scale legal immigration, are xenophobes, people who oppose open borders, there's, again, overwhelmingly likely your compass is so broken you believe Hamas is the hero and Israel is the villain in the Middle East. It all goes together. A country has to have borders just like a house has borders. I am very in favor, most conservatives are, of large-scale legal immigration, but to have unregulated borders. And do you understand? I mean, I look at this and I wonder, do they ever ask themselves, do the people on the left ever confront their own value system? We are for open borders, but if you bring them into our sanctuary cities, we cry, right? New York City is a sanctuary city, but don't you dare bring any of the people that we want to give sanctuary to into our city. You know who believe that that makes sense? Professors. This is the state of our universities. By the way, there is a silver lining in the obscene testimony of 3 Ivy League or 2 Ivy League and MIT presidents who couldn't say that advocating genocide against Jews is hate speech or is harassment. They didn't even ask hate speech. The bright side is, finally, what I have warned all of my life since I was at Columbia in the 1970s, that the university is a moral wasteland, is becoming clear to more Americans. This is the one silver lining. If you apply for a job at TPUSA, I haven't reviewed this with Charlie, but I think this is true. I know it's true for PragerU. It is not only not held against you if you didn't go to college, we tend to think more highly of you if you didn't go to college. The number of young people who go to college, a decent, even happy person, and come out angry, ungrateful, bitter people is very large. As I have said often on my radio show, at an American university, you get a BA in ingratitude, you get a master's in ingratitude, and you get a PhD in ingratitude. And I've written a book on happiness. It's a major theme in my work. And let me tell you something. There is no happy ingrate. It is not possible to be a happy or good human being if you're not grateful. The ingrate is the lowest form of humanity. And ingratitude is the essence of the left. They are all ingrates, and they wish to create more ingrates. You have grown up in the freest, most opportunity-giving country ever made in the history of the world, and you loathe it. You are despicable for that loathing. It is sick. It is sick. America is systemically racist. If you believe that, you're also probably pro-Hamas. Systemically racist? How many college students are taught that 4 million blacks have moved to the United States through legal immigration? 4 million in the last few decades from the Caribbean and Africa. So here's a question that should be posed. Are these people stupid? I'm just curious, would you move to a country that you knew hated you because of your color or race or religion? Of course not. Did any Jews move to Germany in the 1930s? The question is absurd. Of course no Jews moved to Germany because it was systemically anti-Semitic. Those 4 million blacks, and there would be 40 million blacks if we opened the borders completely. That's how many would want to move here, for good reason, because there's no country in the world better for a black or a white or a Hispanic or an Arab or a Muslim or a Jew to live in. Really, I don't understand why there aren't leftists, black leftists and white leftists at Kennedy Airport. And any black coming in from Africa, and they say, hey, don't be an idiot, go back, go back. We're systemically racist, we hate you. And then this black African will look at this person and say, are you out of your mind? Do you know that in Africa we know how wonderful America is? You don't know, because you went to an American university. If you believe that voter ID is racist, you probably support Hamas. Do you know that virtually every democracy on earth has voter ID? How on earth could that possibly be racist? Sir, ma'am, before you vote, we'd like to make sure that you are the person on this list. Why is that bad? Why is that wrong? Why is that racist? It's racist to say it's racist, because the implication is it's too hard for a black to figure out how to get an ID. Ami Horowitz Ami Horowitz, who does these terrific videos of man on the streets type videos, he went to Harlem in Manhattan, and he asked blacks in the street, said, do you know how to get an ID? And they looked at him like he was an idiot. No, you have to see it. It's mind-boggling to watch. They didn't know what he was talking about. They even said, yeah, the DMV, I'll give you the address. If you believe that fewer policemen make safer cities, you probably support Hamas. Do you understand? It's very important that my point be clear. The broken moral compass of the left covers all of these arenas. Supporting Hamas is only the latest and most grotesque example of the morally sick world of the left. I mean, to say this, to say that it's a safer city with fewer policemen, do you understand what sort of perverse form of thought that emanates from? How can you come up with such an idea? Fewer cops means more crime, not less crime. Isn't that obvious in Portland and San Francisco and Chicago and Philadelphia? I mean, isn't it obvious? This list that I'm offering you is just a partial list, but you realize this is what is taught, these perversions of reality, these are taught at college as if they are truths. The contempt for marriage. Maybe you don't know this, but when I was your age, when I was in college, the feminist movement was in its real heyday. And one of their mottos was, a woman without a man is like a fish without a bicycle. It's a very funny phrase. I will acknowledge it's very funny and staggeringly wrong, because men need women and women need men. Do you realize that if I spoke at a left-wing convention, or even the Democratic Party convention, which is now indistinguishable, it used to be liberal, the Democratic Party, it is now leftist. Do you realize that if what I just said, men need women and women need men, I would be booed? Do you understand? You cheered, they would boo. Do you understand the gulf between left and right in the United States? It is not bridgeable. Meanwhile, here is a fact. Even the left acknowledges there are more depressed young women in America today than at any time since they began measuring depression in women. It is all thanks to left-wing horrible advice. Marriage is unnecessary. It's a creation of patriarchy. It's a misogynist institution. Your great happiness in life is going to come from a career. Really, your great happiness will come from a career. Every week on my radio show on Wednesdays, the second hour is called the Male-Female Hour. And I talk very honestly about men and women and male-female issues. A 50 to 60-year-old woman let's say 55, called my show. I have 1,000 columns on the internet. 20 years every week is 1,000. I never in my life wrote a column that I didn't write, except for one. All I did was to transcribe this woman's call that she made to me. Dennis, I have a PhD. I make well into six figures. I bought the whole idea that career is the source of happiness for a woman. I have a dog. But you know what? I come home to a house without a husband and without a child. I bought the feminist line, and I deeply regret it. It was a terrible idea, and they don't give a damn about women, which I said from my time in college. The feminist movement doesn't give a damn about women, and the proof, in case you needed proof, is that they don't come to bat for women in protecting women's sports. They're quiet. I wish the feminist movement was worthless. It is harmful. The idea that women and men are equal is as old as the Bible. God created the human being, male and female, he created them in God's image. There is no distinction, then that's 3,500 years ago. Every decent person knows men and women are equal. We didn't need a feminist movement for that. That's not what feminism taught. If feminism taught to hate men and to believe that marriage is nonsense, that your happiness derives from your income. Oh, really? Then why are so many young women who bought this line so unhappy? I did. I do. I tell them every day. Thank you. I have 2 minutes and 25 seconds left, so let me give you one more example. The University of Pennsylvania, an Ivy League institution, which means nothing. Nothing. A few years ago, the Department of English, this is important, took down the mural of William Shakespeare, the greatest writer of the English language who ever lived. And do you know why? Not because he is not the greatest writer of English. The Department of English at that Ivy League university doesn't give a damn about English literature, just like feminist groups don't give a damn about women. They give a damn about crushing Western civilization. So what did they do? They took him down, and they said why? Because he's a dead, white, European male. But I thought the purpose of the Department of English was to teach English literature. What's the difference whether you are white or European or male? Did you write great literature is the only thing that matters. If you can't tell any of those things, then you can't tell the difference between Israel and Hamas. It would be like people in the late 30s saying, I can't tell the difference between England and Germany. That is how bad things are, that people can't tell the difference. Well, here is one simple difference that you could prove even to many of your relatives. Just ask this question. If Israel announced, we are laying down our arms and we will fight no longer, what would happen? And if Hamas and the Palestinians said, we are laying down our arms and we will fight no longer, what would happen? Well, we know what would happen. The day after Israel would announce it, Israelis would be wiped off the face of the earth. And the day after Hamas would make that announcement, there would be peace in the Middle East. Okay, everybody. God bless you. And please know, if you ever get down, the antidote to getting down is to fight. Thank you so much.
Okay, that's Dennis. So I have to say, I was on pins and needles. I kept waiting for him in his climactic, if you believe, I kept waiting for him to say, if you believe that torturing a baby to death in the womb is healthcare and good for women, then you're probably a Hamas supporter. Of course, he didn't say that because his premise would fail, because of course we all know that there are many people that believe it is healthcare, and yet, well, maybe they're lukewarm on Hamas and they're mostly pro-Israel. So I was a little bit disappointed, especially looking at the images of those young women in the audience. Don't tell me, with all those young women there, I think they had about 5,000 young people there, that they aren't thinking about reproductive justice. I don't care how conservative they are. They've been raised with this idea of abortion as birth control. And I'm sure most of them are sexually active because that's the way it is today. So I was disappointed that he didn't say that. I don't have a relationship with Dennis, so that I can't talk to him about these things, but he may have not wanted to offend anybody that's wounded from abortion that was in the audience. He might not have thought that it was going to support his argument. And I came away thinking that, well, if this influential conservative Jewish commentator, who has the ear and the eye of, millions of people, won't even say it or say something, and what does that mean, and who's supposed to say it? So that's one of the reasons I decided to do the show today, because somebody has to say it. So I'm saying it. I'm privileged, though, to be affiliated with many good rabbis, of whom are friends of the Jewish Pro-Life Foundation. And next, I want to play a clip of a video by Rabbi Dovid Smith, who's very involved with the life issues. He was recently interviewed with a Dr. Glassman about a euthanasia bill that's working its way through the New Jersey legislature. And Dr. Glassman was the only doctor that came out in opposition of this legislation in an actual legal document. Rabbi Smith is doing the legal work. I'm going to bring us in the middle of the video. They've gone through a lot of what the case is about, and then the interviewer asks him about beginning of life issues. And so I'm going to play that, and a little bit as he goes into the explanation of the need for us to continue speaking out about this. He's just incredibly erudite and intelligent and well-spoken. So enjoy Rabbi Smith.
Where we're implementing the part of teaching the non-Jews, particularly, and the Jews, about the important. This is life and death matter. We're past the point that it would be nice to have people thinking about God. The Americans are no longer just merely watching football and playing baseball, or watching baseball instead of going to do religious pursuits. It's now, we could see that is rolling out a whole mentality, and the people that are being trained in schools today have this mentality of, like Dr. Glassman was saying, quality of life, eliminating people as a better solution. This is what the kids coming out of public school are trained with. So someone like Dr. Glassman is already going to be looked at as an obstacle in the medical field and in society as a whole, because he's still holding to some archaic ideas that human beings are infinitely valuable and divinely created. So we're not able to measure the graveness of the danger, and we don't want to speak about the danger because we want to speak of the positive, that we could turn things around. But we have to realize, this case really drives home, we have to realize that society has shifted enormously under our feet while we were busy thinking that we didn't have to be involved in where society is learning, what society is thinking about. Society has shifted enormously so that Dr. Glassman is the only one in New Jersey who would be willing to stand up, put his, among doctors, there was one pharmacist and one patient, but also in the case, but the only doctor, and his viewpoint is going to be considered more and more a nuisance viewpoint. The playing field is no longer level. Someone is going to come along in the hospital and say, no, keep that patient alive. Let's get them out of the hospital in a positive way. That doctor becomes a nuisance and a person who's driving up expenses and taking bed space and so forth. And may even be opposed by the family members who are all too eager to get, and their own suffering.
Rabbi Smith, I'm sorry, I thought you were finished. Go ahead.
No, so I'll let Dr. Glassman have the final word, but I just think this is really very, very, very urgent, and that's why we're asking for people to support the Lifeline Legal Fund.
Yeah, we've been focused on end of life, but maybe you can speak for a moment about beginning of life, because I don't think that the majority of people realize how important it is to protest the abortion.
Well, if someone doesn't realize this, it is a part of our chinuch problem. People don't realize it's important to protest abortion. They don't realize it's important to protest murder. We're in a very, very serious situation. The very question that you asked is the deafening silence and the actual active participation in promoting these death lobby, which, like you said, beginning of life. Torah doesn't recognize the beginning of life because life is a continuum. God Almighty created life at the very beginning with the first man and first woman, and they've gone on nonstop since then. There's no like sudden ending of life, and then a gap, and then all of a sudden conception, and then like a reappearance of life. No, life continues. These are living cells, human living cells that are also in the divine image that are continuing to carry forth God's blessing and command into the world to be fruitful and multiply. So it's astonishing to which degree people have become disconnected from that simple reality that every human being knows about innately. And we have to know that we have to protest, we have to speak at every opportunity that it's murder to abort a fetus. And people manipulate the Torah and mislead the world into thinking the fact that there's a situation of a raidif, of a person who's coming to the pursuer, that a person can act in self-defense, somehow means that there's an exception to abortion. There is no exception to abortion. What there is a completely different situation of a raidif, just like if a guy with an axe was chasing the pregnant woman, then he could be shot. It's not an exception to murder because that's not murder. And same too if the woman, that the fetus is going to, it is determined and certain that it's going to kill the mother through just from the pregnancy, not how difficult her life will be afterwards, but or how the unworthiness of the life of the child is judged by the doctors based on what they analyze the medical condition of the baby to be. That is has to be a real present danger that the mother's life is going to die, is going to be ended by the fetus, and in which case then it's not an exception to the rule against murder. It's a din, it's a law in the din of being a raidif. And then the person is allowed to arise first in self-defense. So this needs to be spoken out clearly in every venue possible, and the chilul Hashem, the desecration of God's name that is said in the name of the Torah, what people are saying today, and the silence is absolutely reprehensible, and it's a very, very dangerous situation. But there's a lot of hope because we do have the opportunity to speak up. We can have events like this. We can get the message out there, and we have to continue to do it nonstop and not say, "Oh, I said this yesterday." Who's going to listen? We have to continue to say it. And it's interesting. The Rambam says that a person should view the world as evenly balanced, and the next act he's going to do is going to turn the entire world to the side of good. So that tells us many different things, but many important messages which we can really need to understand. It's not just he's not giving you a lollipop that hey, you know what, you're not feeling like doing a mitzvah today, so just well, you're going to get a lollipop. The world is going to turn to the side of good. First of all, he's directly attacking the idea that the world is somehow too far gone, that it's not worth doing anything to change the situation. If you think that the situation is too far gone, you are mistaken, because you are meant to view the world as evenly balanced. Any other viewpoint that the world has gone over to the side of bad and nothing you could do could help is a false, non-godly idea. That's the first thing the Rambam is telling us. The second thing he's telling us is that if you think, now that you realize it's balanced, that it's not really worth doing anything, because what it's going to help, if I save one human being from being aborted, what's that going to help? He says, no, it's going to help because that has the potential to shift the entire world and create a cascading nuclear effect that's going to change the entire world to the side of good. So even if you're talking to a person in the street, a man, he's not pregnant, and he doesn't have a pregnant wife or a pregnant girlfriend, then you are still changing him, that he will then pass on the message to someone else, and you could save a life. So the Rambam is telling us we have to take action. You know, there's a lot of talk about activism and before, but I don't think the activism in our day is directed at the thought leaders. It's not directed at the politicians. The activism is to speak to your neighbor in the street and to teach them, open up a Chumash, Bereshis, a book of Genesis, open up, sit down with a non-Jewish neighbor and open up the book of Genesis and say, this is what it says. Because right now, the likelihood is you are the only person that is taking the time to teach them that. And they will understand it to be true because it innately resonates with every single human being. It's built into us. So that's really where we need to be directing our energies.
Rabbi Smith, there's a number of people who have expressed to me. Now, of course, they are adamantly opposed to abortion, but they think that because we're the minority here in this country and that we have to, obviously I completely disagree with what they're saying, but I'm putting it out there so that you can refute it. So for the purpose of everyone who's listening to this recording afterwards, they say, you know, we're the minority. We have to be careful not to make enemies. This is such a politically fraught topic. It's not for us to be talking about it, and it's going to hurt us. So the best thing is just for us to be quiet about the abortion. And I'm so upset when I hear that, and I know that they're so wrong. So I want you to unequivocally explain to them why they're wrong.
Well, first of all, that contradicts the very definition of what it means to be a Jew. Mm-hmm. Avram Avinu defined himself as a Jew because he was willing to say what no one else wanted to hear, and he made enemies. And he made people, it says that Avram was on one side of the world and everyone else was on the other side of the world. So this is a totally anti-Jewish perspective, and it results from, I'm sure these are, some even religious people are saying this, they just did not get the proper chinuch, the proper dedication to the service of God Almighty to realize what it means that they're a Jew. And we have to realize that the world is waiting to us to speak. We are the Mamlachas Kohanim, the Ur La'amim, the nation of priests, the nation of the light into the world, the teachers to the world, the witnesses of God's existence in the world. And our job is to tell the world what's correct and what's not correct. In fact, one of the sons of one of the secretaries of the Lubavitcher Rebbe told me that he has a safe full of letters that have never been published, where the Lubavitcher Rebbe wrote to different presidents, prime ministers, and kings around the world to tell them how their country should be run. And one of the particular issues he mentioned was that he wrote to them against abortion, that they should not allow abortion in their countries, because the Rebbes said clearly we have an obligation to prevent abortion from happening, particularly in places where we have, like in the land of Israel, where we have the ability to establish the law. But in the United States of America, we also have the ability to establish the law. That is why we have a vote. We have a vote because we are the lawmakers of the United States of America. So we have an obligation to say what the law should be, to stay silent and allow people who want to promote murder to take the lead and then to transform the country into a place of murder is an abdication of our responsibility as Jews and Americans. And it's a disgraceful act as Jews and a disgraceful act as Americans to be silent when so many Americans have been murdered. 62 million Americans were murdered since 1973 through abortion. And for a person to have the gall to say that that doesn't make a difference to them, they're not going to speak about it because they might make enemies. obviously we see that the enemies that are fighting against God already exist. They're not going to be created because you stand up to speak. Someone is trying to scare you into silence by propagandizing you into being afraid. And I want to mention two things that we have to understand about the Nazis. Number one is Nazi propaganda about anti-Semitism and all the anti-Semitic propaganda. I had a realization on the night of Yom Kippur, which I really was shocked by and really felt I was going to fall over when it suddenly hit me. The Nazi anti-Jewish propaganda was not directed at the non-Jews. The Nazi anti-Semitic propaganda was directed at the Jews, that they should feel so threatened by the German society around them, that they should feel so unworthy and so hated and so pursued that they would be afraid to reach out to their German neighbor and to say, this is wrong and we need to do something differently and that this is not good for Germany. The propaganda was meant to beat the Jews into submission, not to get the non-Jews riled up into becoming Jew haters, although there might have been a side effect of that. But the main target was the Jew to become passive and silent. And it was exactly this that Hitler was able to capitalize on. If you read Mein Kampf, which every person should read, and I suspect that one of the reasons it's being banned more and more frequently is because they don't want people to read this. But Mein Kampf is a brilliant psychological manipulation piece to take the average German man and turn him from being a loyal German to becoming a person who would support the end, God forbid, of the Jewish people. And how does Hitler accomplish that? Very, very cleverly. He correctly portrays Marxism as the greatest threat to German society and the German people. Then he says, and they are called the Social Democrats. Social Democrats are the Marxists of Germany. Then Hitler writes that the Social Democrats are the Jews. Now, how could he say that? Most Jews were not Social Democrats. He was able to say that because the leading publishers of the Social Democrat newspapers were Jews in many cases. What he was able to accurately point out to the German population was that those screaming loudest for Marxism were Jews. And what was there available to contradict what he had to say? Absolute or close to absolute silence. Because there was no voice of Torah that was being promulgated as a counterpoint to what Hitler was saying. There was no one standing up and saying, I don't want to say no one because maybe there are people that I'm not aware of. But the Torah voice was not being heard and saying that Marxism is a threat to Germany, and Marxism is a threat to humanity, and Marxism is an anti-God movement. Because that voice was not being heard in the general population as a whole, then Hitler was able to manipulate the population into saying, you see, all you hear is these noisy Jews over here, and they are all Social Democrats. They're all Marxists. They're all a threat to Germany. Now, that was a successful argument. And therefore, the German Jew and the Jews in general were the pest that were pushing Marxism. And he writes over there that when you speak to a Marxist/Jew, that they are unredeemable. Because if you ever spoke to a Marxist, a dedicated Marxist, they're not interested in anything to do with truth. They're not interested in anything to do with people suffering or anything to do with God or anything to do with anything that is true. So he was able to authoritatively say that these Jews are unredeemable because he had associated them with the Marxists, with the Social Democrats, and that was a lie in itself. When I say authoritatively, he was able to say without refutation, because who were the loudest voices in Germany advocating for Marxism were these Jewish voices. So the silence will be used against the Jews.
I will put the link to that whole video in the show description. I really like what he has to say. And I know we're getting late. I do want to just reference one thing that he did say when he was trying to talk about the difference between deliberately killing a baby in the womb and relieving the mother of a life-threatening condition. Language that he doesn't know yet is about preterm delivery. I want to share a blog that our friend Rabbi Friedlander wrote about that, which I think is very important for us to understand if we are going to talk about this issue. He has a blog, People for Public Morality. Preterm delivery and the Jewish legal debate on abortion. Terminology is so important. Not everyone who discusses abortion is actually discussing a medical abortion. Preterm deliveries that result in death are not technically induced abortions, medically speaking, according to the American Association of Pro-Life OBGYNs. But a preterm delivery is what some lenient halachic discussions mean by the word abortion. Hebrew and Aramaic are not English. The English word abortion has nothing to do with leniencies in Torah law, whose discussion on potential leniencies in these manners is exclusively limited to the concept of preterm delivery as we know it. All halachic discussion about saving the mother at the expense of the fetus is a discussion of what doctors call preterm delivery. All medical debate on abortion as a whim is what Torah law calls bloodshed. Know this clearly and let your moral decision also be clear from now on. Don't allow the misuse of semantics to lead you astray on a matter of life and death. So, if you ever heard a quote of a rabbi that somehow supports abortion in some rare cases, preterm delivery is what he probably meant. The intent is to save the life of the mother, and how much can one risk the fetus to do so? In both cases, we desire life that both mother and child live. The discussion is in how much and under what circumstances can the fetus be risked if the mother is at risk without the operation, and the necessary procedure would place the yet-to-be-born baby in significant jeopardy. There is no Talmudic discussion about lifestyle preferences that enable bloodshed whatsoever. All who attempt to write leniencies into God's law based on a misunderstanding of Torah law, halakha, make this same mistake at the onset of their assumptions. But please understand that there's no such thing as open season hunting on fetuses in the Torah. It is heretical to fundamental Torah ethics and morality to even suggest that. And lastly, he's referring to a statement put out by APLOG. We're a member of APLOG as a affiliated organization because they're my go-to people for any rabbi who is approached about a woman terminating her pregnancy. And they say, as experienced practitioners and research in obstetrics and gynecology, we affirm that direct abortion is not medically necessary to save the life of a woman. We uphold that there is a fundamental difference between abortion and necessary medical treatments that are carried out to save the life of the mother, even if such treatments result in the loss of life of her unborn child. We confirm that the prohibition of abortion does not affect in any way the availability of optimal care to pregnant women. And I always like to stress that with today's medical technology and our neonatal intensive care units, many of these babies can be saved because many of these problems that women face come in the second to third trimester of pregnancy. That's my positive note. Thank you for listening to all of that. I'm more convinced than ever that we need to keep talking about this. Okay, so I'm going to open this up for discussion. Yes, Ross, thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I've been reading the Lozier Institute, Charlotte Lozier, which is part of Susan B. Anthony. They have a new document just came out. Well, actually, it's from January 2023, Handbook of Maternal Mortality. There is a misrepresentation that the pro-abortion people have been saying that childbirth is 14 times more deadly than abortion. It's completely false. This document really goes through why it's completely false. First of all, abortions take place on a short period of time. The CDC takes a whole year from childbirth on. If a woman dies during that period of time, they seem to relate it to the pregnancy when it could be a heart condition. Um, it could even be after abortion, uh, stress, mental illness, suicide, alcoholism, all kinds of other things that affect it. It's a good document. It takes a long time to read it because it's like 34 pages long. Uh, this case in Texas of the woman that was late in pregnancy, I think her name is Kate, that it turned out the baby has trisomy 18. Uh, my former US Senator's daughter has that. That's Santorum. His daughter is now about 14. Uh, People can survive from it. And this woman in Texas tried to say that if she continued the pregnancy without an abortion, uh, her life, would be jeopardized, and it's completely false. There's no proof of that, and as Cecily said, APLOG has information about that. Uh, the false things that people are saying about abortion to promote abortion is just incredible. We're still fighting the battle here in Wyoming. Just to give you a quick update, um, last week or week before, the Supreme Court of Wyoming was deciding, and they haven't made a decision, whether Wyoming Right to Life can weigh in on the case here, which would allow us to then make a strong argument that Judaism is pro-life and there's no reason for an exception for Jews who they claim, the challengers claim, uh, needs an exception to the law because they claim Judaism requires abortion. It's just ridiculous. The other thing is we're waiting for the judge to see whether she's going to allow these doctors that made a presentation to her, whether she's going to look at that presentation saying that when an obstetrician is treating a patient that's pregnant, they have two patients, not one, which makes the whole situation different and makes the baby a person. So we're still fighting the battle here. The abortion business is still running. They're still injuring people. We've seen that. So that's my report from Wyoming.
Thank you, Ross. Great to hear from you. Great to see you. You look well. When I was listening to the part of Rabbi Smith's interview, he was talking about the legal shenanigans in New Jersey, and the New Jersey court will not allow any reference to the genocide of the Holocaust in Germany when they're talking about this mass euthanasia legislation they want to pass, medical aid in dying, because they don't want anybody to hear about the T4 programs in Germany, which was the beginning of all the euthanasia in Germany. This is like a redo of it here. There's a real strong push to silence life-affirming voices in the States now. Yes, thanks very much for tuning in today and sharing. Okay, who would like to share next?
I had a question as far as the organization goes. I'm down in South Florida, and when it comes to a lot of these like anti-abortion groups, they're mainly the Christian groups that are out there. And I did wonder for some years, like, why don't the local rabbis kind of come together on this? It almost just seems very, okay, well, that's what they do, and we just don't get involved. We just focus on our own Jewish communities, but not necessarily team up with the Christians or even non-Christian pro-life groups. Is there something to make more awareness that, hey, there are Jewish organizations that do support pro-life?
That's a great question. Thanks for being here today. There's lots of reasons that I've learned over the years since starting the Jewish Pro-Life Foundation in 2006. There is a lack of appreciation of the Jewish commandment to protect our neighbors from being murdered. And I wrote about that in my last newsletter. It comes from Deuteronomy 1:9, where it talks about the villagers atone for not somehow or another taking responsibility for a person that they don't even know that they find has been murdered, like they find them out in a field. And that villagers actually have to atone by sacrificing an innocent calf because they failed in their moral duty to protect and provide provision for a stranger. Now, I know growing up in my family, my mother especially, God rest her soul, was very interested in her family and not much interested in other people. My dad was much more interested in the community. He was very active in the community. It isn't taught to Jewish people to be personally responsible and obligated to stand up for the innocent child in the womb, although in our drive for this tikkun olam, repairing the world, we're into every single, injustice in the world except what's going on in our own community. This is why our mission is to bring much needed Torah-based pro-life education into the Jewish community, because we have been really underserved, partly because Jews are taught to avoid Christian content, Catholic content, for fear that if we're exposed to it, somehow we'll be converted out of Judaism. I always say if we were given a more spiritually nourishing upbringing when it comes to our Jewishness, there would be no risk of that. That's one problem. The other problem is rabbis are paid by their congregations, and 90% of Jews now feel that torturing a baby to death in the womb is morally acceptable in all or most cases. And so what rabbi who wants to maintain his livelihood is going to stand up and do a pro-life sermon when he knows he's talking to people that won't renew his contract if he says that? Also, they worry about offending or hurting women who have had abortions, because we all know women suffer, even though there's a lot of energy put into denying that fact. And the rabbis have no education about healing after abortion. We do provide a teshuva-based healing program for Jewish women and men, but they don't know what to do with those women. So they're going to get a bunch of really disturbed people coming forward if they even talk about the issue, and their wives are mostly pro-choice. And this is of course, the reform and the conservative movements, and growing in the modern Orthodox movement. The donations that these organizations, not only synagogues, but establishment Jewish organizations, are very dependent on donations. And a lot of those donations are coming from Jews that believe that it's okay to do this. They believe it's okay because they're not getting the information they need, like Rabbi Smith was talking about, and because people like Dennis Prager don't teach them. So it's like a catch-22. And lastly, in the current environment, I do agree with that woman that was interviewing the rabbi, which is they're afraid. They're afraid of being attacked. They're afraid of the DOJ being weaponized against them. It's a lack of complete dependency on Hashem and moving forward with this challenge that we have to protect and provide provision for even those we don't know. And I always default back to this. We don't know the baby in the womb, of the people next door or whatever in the next village, but we still, as Jews, are obligated to do what we can to avoid shedding that innocent blood. So yes, so I hope that answers your question, and thank you for asking it. And please come back anytime and ask questions and feel comfortable enough to share with us.
So yeah, I think we owe a debt of gratitude to Christians for what they're doing on abortion. Even if 100% of Jews were pro-life, there's not enough of us to change the outcome of this by voting. So I don't think that we should give in at all to say, well, this is what Christians do, so we don't want to do it. And you made me think about the atonement done for the dead body that they find between two cities. They measure to see which one was closer. But it made me think also, everybody's familiar about the what we would call in America manslaughter, a death caused without malice, unintentional death. it was sort of an open air prison that they were sent to, right? But it wasn't just like a big field that they send people to. These were the towns of the Levites. These were the holy people that they were being housed with. So in some ways, like in modern society, we put people in prison for small crimes, and they come out with like a bachelor's degree in crime because they're surrounded by career criminals. But the original system was to put people around mentors that could teach them, holy lessons that they should be learning. And so it just really strikes me when you say we don't want to offend people that have had abortions. Well, what do we do? I mean, instead of worrying about offending them, we should be mentoring people so that they're never in that situation. And it just boggles my mind. There's an analogy. I don't know if I've told you guys before or not. If so, it's worth repeating to anyone that hasn't heard it. But like we were talking earlier in the group about some of us individuals being willing to walk the plank for what we believe in, but forcing other people to walk the plank, that's a little bit of a different story. So the analogy on this, obviously with abortion, Barack Obama, when he was a state senator, they tried to pass legislation so that if an abortion failed and that the child survived, that the doctor would be required to provide medical care for the child who's alive and now completely separated from the mother. And twice he voted to kill that bill so that the child must die. So somebody was bringing up the fact that there's two patients involved. They're actually trying to stop that. So to say that even after the child's born, it's not a patient. It doesn't deserve medical care. But the analogy I wanted to bring up about other people is that I heard this one time and I thought it was really powerful. Most of us are old enough to remember the riots of 2020. So it was during that time that somebody brought up an analogy that said, what happens if you come out one morning in the middle of town and you find a black guy hanging from a tree, from a noose, with his arms and legs bound behind his back? So it's not a suicide. This is a clear case of murder. And nobody's able to find out who did it. For whatever reason, there's no camera showing anybody, at the scene. So after a while, the people are getting upset because there's no justice. They're going to riot. We know billions of dollars of damage are going to be done. People are going to be killed in the riots. So if a crooked sheriff comes up to a crooked judge and says, look, we got a guy, he's homeless, nobody's going to miss him. We know he was in jail the night of the murder, so we know he didn't do it. But in order to save the damage and the lives of other people, let's just frame him. The sheriff tells the judge, get a dirty lawyer, run the trial. We'll get a conviction on him. And, that way we'll save lots of lives. So if you say this is acceptable in order to save the lives of other people, I disagree with that. But if you say that you can't kill this innocent guy, he could be executed for this, for something he's innocent, then what you're saying is the rights of one individual outweighs all of the masses. And that's what I believe the position we have to take, just like that first rabbi was speaking about society has changed for the worse. And they take the position that for depression, for lifestyle, for whatever reason, it's acceptable to kill lots of people. And I believe that we should be taking the position that every life is important, and that outweighs, the potential causes, uncomfortableness, damages that could occur as a result. So, that's my take on it.
Okay, thank you, Rabbi Yosef. Anybody else want to share?
Yeah, I've got something. Just a response to what Rabbi Yosef was saying. Of course, I have to offer a differing opinion. But I guess my question would be, do you think that women who are considering an abortion are more likely or less likely to receive support from an anti-abortion foundation if the foundation is more welcoming toward them and doesn't guilt or shame them. Because I'm sure, women experience, like the women that get abortions experience a level of shame and guilt already. I don't feel that it's necessary to guilt and shame them into it more, and so I just see like a more delicate and soft approach being effective. I mean, I could be wrong, but that's just my opinion.
So I'm not aware of any anti-abortion groups that are out there shaming women who are coming for help or advice. If you join the pro-life groups on Facebook, I'm convinced that the women that are there on the fence, that are seeking opinions from both sides, are more convinced to become pro-life by the pro-choice people than they are the pro-life, just because the shaming, the nasty behavior that I see is coming from the pro-choice crowd. They see pictures of dead babies and they laugh, react at them. They say they want to see more of them. They're proud of having multiple abortions. And then in response to that, the pro-life people, they don't get mad and yell and call them names, which I think they would be justified in doing based on their behavior, but they actually show compassion and say, listen, why don't you consider alternatives like adoption? And many people don't even know that you could get sometimes $30,000 plus all your medical expenses, including maternity clothes, paid for by the adopting family. So the pro-life side I see is the ones being respectful and providing options and education that the women don't know about. And the pro-choice side is the one that I see behaving shamefully. Now, just because I'm not aware of anti-abortion people that are shaming women doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So if you have examples of them going to a pro-life, resource center and being mistreated, then let me know and I'll condemn that if it's happening. But from what I personally have seen, the commendable behavior is coming from the pro-life side.
Yes, thank you, Rabbi. Yes, it's very interesting how you pose your question, also, Yaakov, because pro-life people are given a negative rap by calling us anti-abortion. It's the first problem. It's the semantics again. And I can share with you that I know many people in the pro-life pregnancy care resource movement. They are incredibly loving and self-sacrificing. We are only defined and characterized by shaming and hating by abortion advocates who want to discourage women from accessing pregnancy care. And so, yes, I have never met anybody in the pregnancy care organizations that are shaming these women. Now, I will say I've had a fair amount of time out on the sidewalk in front of abortion clinics, and there are overzealous activists there that do broadcast harsh messages to the women going into the abortion clinics. That is counterproductive, and they're an embarrassment to pro-life activities outside of abortion clinics. Those people may be held up as an example of this kind of thing, but they're not the rule, and they're not associated with pregnancy care resource organizations. And I think Ross can attest to that. He's very active in, and has been for a long time, in pregnancy care resource centers. And well, he's an example of what they all are, loving, compassionate, helpful to a fault. Okay, I hope that answers your question, and thank you for asking it. Dave wants to share.
Okay, so what triggers from some of the comments is that what else can we do, right? Now, supposing the pro-life community pushed for legislation that the same amount of money that is being given by the government to, let's say, Planned Parenthood and other kinds of abortion clinics, that it be matched and given to pregnancy centers, and now there'd be a hue and a cry, but it's health care. It's as much health care helping a pregnant woman have a baby as having a pregnant woman kill a baby. So it would be, I don't know, it's $600 million plus to Planned Parenthood, and let's just say there's another 100 million. So it's just $750 million that might be available, and it would be hard to argue against it. They'd be like having to criticize, I think, their own position and saying, no, women aren't, it's not deserving of any government funding. So anyway, that's the thought that occurred to me.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Dave is such a wonderful friend of the JPLF. Thank you for being here. It's a great idea, but dare I be somewhat negative? I doubt that it will ever even be proposed in Congress, even with a Republican majority. But I could be wrong, like I've heard this morning. Right now, abortion is off the table in terms of Republican politics. The best we have these days is some of the candidates saying we should have a 15-week ban, which allows 99% of torturing babies to death in the womb legally. So that's not helpful. There's this false narrative that was started after the 2022 elections that abortion was the cause of the demise of the Republican candidates. That's one problem with that. They see it as political suicide to even bring anything like that up because they won't be reelected. And the other thought I had about that was, you look at the amount of money that's being sent overseas to protect other people's borders, and zero money is spent in the United States for protecting our own. And that's because there's, of course, an agenda behind that. And there's also an agenda behind all this money going to abortion profiteers. That money gets recycled back into these campaigns for Republican and Democrat candidates. And there is also a motivation to depopulate the country and destroy families. So that's another reason why I don't think this will be proposed. But I have a recent December 20th article from Life News. There are friends there. Planned Parenthood collects $1,780 in tax dollars for every baby killed in abortion. So that's one of the newest documents to come out. And it says here, the federal government gave $2.03 million for global abortion industry giant International Planned Parenthood. It's also reported that from 2021 to 2022, the Biden administration increased funding to Planned Parenthood through Department of Health and Human Services from $5.71 million to $27.06 million, a 373% increase. This came about after the Biden administration rescinded the Trump-era Protect Life rule for Title X programs, which barred all groups that received federal funding through the Title X from referring women to abortion providers. Okay, so there's a lot of money. And even though we seem to be so willing to fund all these other programs, there just doesn't seem to be the political will among conservatives to propose what you're saying.
My thought was to position it as women's health care, just like they got their. So how can they argue against women's health care? The apologue doctors can make the proper case as why this is important for women's health care. And so they're like backed into a corner that no matter what they say, they're going to lose. Because if it's not good for women's health care for this purpose, why is it good for women's health care for the other purposes? So anyway, it has to be done very finessed. And the word abortion should probably not come up in the conversation, but maybe it can be repositioned.
Let's pray that some politician has the understanding of how important it is to try to do that. I know APLUG is very involved now at the Supreme Court level, working to reverse the FDA's recent dropping of all the medical safety around the abortion pill. So hopefully they'll prevail in that court case. I think Rabbi Smith said people are just conditioned now to think that abortion is health care. And because feminism doesn't consider women's health to be important, I don't know who would even propose this. But we can pray that it happens. Thank you, Dave. The reason the JPLF exists is to carry this life-affirming message to one person at a time. So whenever we do a program, or whenever I post anything on social media, or whenever you post something on social media, or talk to your neighbors or friends or family members, one person's conscience given by God is just a little bit teased, into thinking maybe a little bit differently than the way we've been taught. It's not going to be coming from a political solution, that's for sure.
One last thing, and then we'll leave it alone. Nobody ever talks about health care for preborn babies. So I would just file that somewhere in the thing. Somebody may figure out how to make that a thing.
Okay, thank you. Ross mentioned in Wyoming, there was 4 pro-life doctors that gave testimony about their 2 patients that they have. And the Supreme Court has to rule if they're able to allow their testimony. It's a very good argument.
Hey, Yore, you think there's any room up there in Sweden for a Jewish pro-life chapter?
This is the most ungodly nation on the planet. Abortion is eaten like candy.
Do they not realize the demographic imbalances with your immigration of all these people that are producing all these large families and want to overwhelm the Swedish people?
You would be amazed at what 40 years of liberalism will do to a people. They are the most out of touch, brainwashed, ill-informed people you're ever going to meet in your life in that regard. This is really bad. The worst I've ever seen.
I mean, is there any conservative movement?
If you wear a Swedish flag on the day the national team is playing football, they're still going to call you a Nazi.
Oh, they do that here. You'll get kicked out of, suspended from school if you wear, an American flag. It's considered racist and offensive to the criminals that have entered this country illegally who wear their flags.
So no, there's really no conservative movement. But what is happening is everybody called it the right-wing party. Yes, they have some right-wing elements to them. And yes, their roots were based in fascism. They really were based in fascism, 30 years ago, right? They really were. But they're the only voice of reason. I mean, many foreigners and immigrants, such as myself, actually vote for them because we can't have any more Muslims, because we've got lots of Christian Arabs who live in Sweden. All the Christian Arabs vote for them to stop the Muslim Arabs from coming in.
Okay, who would like to share next? Go ahead, sir.
I belong to multiple communities. Some of them kind of conflict with each other. Most Black people I know, me being Black myself, a part of the Caribbean community, but also Jew, sometimes it can conflict when bringing a certain message. So I have to try to package it a certain way because there's already preconceived notions all the way around. I've seen this issue with the abortion clinics, mainly put in underserved communities or historically Black communities in America for the most part. And they're readily accessible. And, when you have poverty and whatnot, these clinics seem to be almost like a safe haven. Hey, I don't want my life to go down the drain any more than what it is, how I'll be able to take care of this child. So, and they may not even want to go off of, at least the ones I've heard that I've asked these questions to personally that wanted to share that, they just didn't want to continue the cycle of, hey, I seen it was hard for my mom or their grandma or the person across the street, down the road, at school. So this was just the easier path. They may have wanted to keep the child, but there is still a shame that associates it. Despite what the media narrative is, when you talk to people directly, more of them feel more shame about it. And even the long-lasting ramifications, like what it might do to you physically or just your own perception. Like my wife has friends that had, to their own personal shame, had partaken in this act in a time where they thought there was no other way. And then they see our son, he's a toddler, and it kind of makes them feel like, man, my child would have been this age by now. So is there a way I could package this message and tell them in somewhere that can be like acceptable, where it's not politically leaning one way or the other, or, oh, this Black Jew's trying to tell me something. Hey, you're not, aren't you really a part of this community or that community? But I can fashion this from your experience, that I can deliver it, and maybe more people can accept it, because it seems like it's not working the way I'm saying it now.
Okay, thank you for asking. It's so tragic, isn't it? There's a lot of abortion regret out there. I see two approaches. Most people, because we're human, we have a tendency to believe what we're thinking. And a lot of us have negative thinking or fault-finding minds. Our minds have been warped and polluted by this negative thinking in our families or over generations, and through the decades of propaganda, like the gentleman from Sweden was talking about, after decades of thinking that what's the use anyway, or if you stand up for God and family and children, you're somehow on the wrong side of history, or you lack some virtue, right? So people have these warped ideas, and that needs to be treated by really solid life affirming messaging. That was what Rabbi Smith was talking about. This idea of, life affirming principle is a universal principle. It doesn't have to do with any kind of demographic, what color you are, what gender you are, whatever. It's a God-centered natural law that people innately understand. That's what Dennis Prager was talking about. Innately, we understand what's good and what's evil, and we know it's good to have children and raise them. And I've gone to many of these pro-life events, and people hold signs, and one of them said, if I can remember, it said, "We don't want you to be hungry, abused, or poor, so we'll kill you instead." That's crazy. But people buy into that. That's one of these social reasons to destroy a baby in the womb without pain medication is, well, that's the ultimate child abuse. So people need to be aware of this without shaming them, because I always say it's very important to not cast shame on anybody that makes these decisions. Because first of all, there is a trap that's set for women by profiteers and genocidal maniacs out there. And it's all geared towards convincing women that this is the best thing to do, and fathers. Okay, because if we had fathers that stood up to protect their children and assume responsibility for them, then we wouldn't have nearly the problem we have. So it's a matter of fathers abdicating their responsibility, and that's ungodly as well. But there is a trap set for people, and we're now, like Rabbi Smith said, we're growing up in a culture where we're taught these things. I mean, we have children now, in kindergarten that are taught these perverse ideas about men and women and sexuality and all this stuff and reproductivity. And so by the time they're in their teens, they just think a certain way. I mean, I for years was neutral on this because I didn't know any better. And I wasn't given access to the kinds of ideas that I needed until much later in life. In Judaism, we're not actually culpable for our sin if it's done in ignorance and because we haven't been given Torah values. And God is very merciful. And that's that Musar tradition that we have, which is, God is our Heavenly Father and loves us. I mean, He loves us beyond our understanding, right? This is what makes the Christian ethos so attractive to people who desperately need to feel that there's the Heavenly Father who loves them and actually expects us to make ridiculous mistakes, tragic errors in life. And all He wants to do is forgive us and make it all right. Our minds need to be treated. And the other is that where are the people in these communities that are offering to take those babies and raise them, or to provide provision and practical help? Of course, if women aren't being supported within their families and by the fathers of the babies, we need community to do that. In this case, like Hillary Clinton was right, it takes a village, right? Where are the villagers? This is what breaks my heart when it comes to Jewish culture. Just like most Catholic churches have a Respect Life group, and they work at this and they let their congregation members know that people are available for them. Every shul and synagogue should have a respect life group. And if a woman gets herself into trouble, or if a fella makes the wrong choice, rather than be shamed into making the wrong choice, people need to rally around them and offer help. And this is where, unfortunately, our lousy leadership once again fails to bring this message into our communities. Does that answer your question, sir? It's hard to package it because there's so many layers to it. And also, there's healing. There are so many healing programs now. If the person is Jewish, there's Jewish ones. If they're Christian, there's so many wonderful. There's a place after abortion support. All over the internet, you can find no-cost healing programs that provide that very necessary service for people so that they can move on with their lives instead of being tormented. Because what do they say? You will never forget the child you never knew. Parents are haunted by this for a lifetime. It's a sad situation.
Yeah, thank you for answering my question. My mother-in-law, she didn't partake in abortion coming out of the 60s and 70s, but she did lose a child, and she's just never forgot, like, hey, this child would be 30 something by now. It's like you're just trapped in that moment. I mean, she lives her lives, but at least once a year bring it up. Yeah, I just wondered how I would do that. Oh, by the way, I want to say hello to Yaakov. I have not heard from Yaakov in quite some time, so it's nice to see, we're on the same line today.
Okay, thanks for being here. Yes, abortion regret comes out in many ways. A lot of times on the anniversary of the abortion or the anniversary of when the baby would have been born. I'll put a link to this website, Support After Abortion, and they have a hotline there. You can contact them. We've had people that contact us that are well into their 70s and have lived 50 years with this guilt.
If any of you are excited about being involved in the movement of the Jewish Pro-Life Foundation, I wish that you would go to jewishprolifefoundation.org and sign up for the newsletter. That way you'll get all the updates on when we're having our meetings.
I have a little following on TikTok of 400 some people, and I mainly post Jewish content to inform. So minus the hate, this would be good information to at least make a post about. Just kind of put awareness.
Please post. I will put all of our social media links in the chat, and then just please repost everything. Okay, now Dave, did you want to share again? You have your hand up.
There is an argument which I used yesterday with an archbishop, which kind of resonated well. I don't know why it occurred to me. I was visiting and we were talking about cooperation with the Jewish community and with the Jewish Pro-Life Foundation to raise money. I mean, I've known him for a long time. I know his predecessors. What's important is what I said was, we're trying to do the same thing. We're trying to prepare and hasten the way for the Messiah. So what I said was, the Christian religion was started with the birth, of course, yesterday was Christmas, with the birth of an at-risk baby. The people were trying to kill it. And it was born into that environment. We are at the end of the process, preparing the way for the Mashiach. And one of the many things we have to do is fix this problem. God doesn't start something unless he knows how it's going to end. So part of the process is fixing this problem of not trying to kill at-risk babies. And it resonated with him. We're both trying to do the same thing. And even if the person's not Jewish, they can respond to the fact that, yes, this is part of their heritage. I only thought of that because you said, how do you approach somebody? And if they're Christian, this might resonate with them.
That's a great way of posing the issue. That's terrific. I really appreciate you sharing that. I'm glad that Archbishop that you spoke with appreciated that. And I look forward to maybe talking with him. You do such great outreach, Dave. He's so dedicated. He never tires of trying to reach out and connect our Jewish work with more of an ecumenical process. And it's really good. Okay, we have gone so late now. It's getting to almost 2 hours. So I think what I'll do is I'll just ask if anybody else has anything they want to share before we close this wonderful time together.
Yaakov here. I just wanted to give a word of appreciation toward you, Cecily. I see like what you're doing, and I appreciate week in, week out, you're still holding these meetings and raising awareness. So I'm grateful for that.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm glad we could be here together today. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I put my email in the chat, Cecily@jewishprolifefoundation.org. You can please contact me anytime if you want to make a time to talk over the phone. I put our social media account links in the chat. I do try to post regularly, so please do share those posts. And if you have any ideas about memes or articles or anything, let me know. I love collaborating with our friends. If you have an idea and want to submit an opinion piece, we could put it on our blog. If you know somebody or have been affected by an abortion experience, please contact us to participate in our Tikvat Rachel post-abortion healing program. And moving forward, just a little bit of news. We have found a very generous web host who's Torah observant, who offered to host us for free for life. So I'm rebuilding the website. It's going to be simpler, a little more streamlined and more accurate. And that's taking me a little while to do, but God willing, in the next few months, we'll get that published, and it will have an online store so we can sell some tchotchkes to help support our public charities. Let's stay in touch and let's stay in contact with Hashem and let him guide us and strengthen us as we go forward.
I'm the news that nobody expected. I was never a part of your plan. I'm the reason why life as you know it feels like it's slipping through your trembling hands. And the doctors say I'm just an option, a mistake you can make disappear. I may not have a voice, but I'm more than a choice. I'm as real as the heartbeat you hear. So don't close the book on me yet. I've still got a long way to go. Empty pages to fill, and the best part is still down the road. Oh, I am a story untold. I am God's miracle in the making. Proof that all things can work for the good. I am fingers and toes, and heaven already knows the name you pick out for me already belongs to me. So don't close the book on me yet. I've still got a long way to go. Empty pages to fill, and the best part is still down the road. Oh, I am a story untold. Every life is sacred, and every life is a gift, and every life deserves a chance to live. I know you're scared, I know you're scared, I know you're scared right now. But when you hear my first cries, and when you look in my eyes, you'll understand why you brought me to life. So don't close the book on me yet. I've still got a long way to go. Empty pages to fill, and the best part is still down the road. Oh, I am a story untold. May there be abundant peace from heaven and good life upon us and upon all Israel. Amen.